will show you another interesting use case of using AI.
Sorry, one moment, please. I didn't remember. One moment.
Take your time, no worries. I think you have to click on the built-in display and then arrange, maybe. That is extended display.
Oh, there we are. Okay. Got a little lost in the windows, kind of like using Zoom, too. There we go. All right, great presentations, by the way, from the former two presenters. I learned a lot this morning already. All right, ready to go. Hi, I'm Dave Gullo, and I'm the founder and inventor of Videate. And we use AI and automation to make software videos that pass the Turing test. Specifically, we use AI and automation to fully interact with applications and devices, and we make compelling videos that don't require any video editing skills or post-production. In order to do that, we need to describe the script. So we have many formats that we deal with. Here would be a Google Doc or a Microsoft Word document, and it's just a 2-column table with narrative and actions. In other contexts, we work with data, and people might use XML processing instructions. Here we have the Videate processing instruction, which calls out a slide that embeds an image. So from these other presentations today, if you're generating content with data, where we pick up is we add decorations for making video. Here's a docbook example. It's another method here with XML comments. You see that in green here. And so we deal with many formats, and as Veet spoke about at XMLPrague 2022, we use all kinds of formats on the outside, and then we ingest and validate that on the inside. So I want to show you that a little bit here real quick, and then we'll get into the interactive portion of this. So the net effect of ingestion is to create a Spiel XML doc. That's our parlance here. This is sort of our domain-specific language. And so here we're mousing around and using several UI elements. We're highlighting an element and then clicking another one. Okay. A couple more quick ones just so you get a sense of what we do. In this example, we load a number of URLs into named tabs. We start recording, we focus one, and then we begin speaking while focusing another browser tab, and then we show an image, stop the recording, wait a few seconds, and then resume again. And then the last one is just a zoom test. So here we can control zooming into different quadrants of the screen and mousing around and having it follow it and so forth. So with all of this, I like to say that we're actually more of a transformation company that just happens to make videos, because the stack that we have here is so extensive on the ingest side for dealing with all the various formats that our customers use. So, but I'm not here to sell you on Videate, but rather to tell you about my journey using LLMs to generate XML. But before we begin that tale, I just want to show you a few more rudiments under the hood here that we use, and then we'll build some prompts to work against it. So we're big fans of all the W3C technologies. So as Veet mentioned, let me click that. There we go. Click. There we go. As Veet mentioned, we use Spiel XSD for describing our storyboard and our main parlance. We use XSLT for transforming all forms of documents into XML, because docx, that's XML, data, docbook, many others. And then also, we use XPath all over the place. In fact, where we use XPath is pretty interesting on the UI side of things, because inside the browser is a DOM, and we need to sort of point to things in an evergreen fashion, because the apps that we make videos of, they evolve and they change. It causes a lot of problems, actually. And then we use SSML. So like with SSML, speech synthesis markup language, that's where all of our voices come from our providers, and then we intermix all of these things in mixed content, and that essentially builds the do this and say this forever loop that happens. Okay, so Okay, come on now. There we go. While we do use a lot of XML, we do have JSON in our API, which is a better tool for interfacing with our front ends and our front end frameworks. And while JSON schema and JSON path look really interesting, really for our data model, we chose to use W3C sort of XML technologies. So anyways, the biggest benefit to choosing XML over JSON is that it's a direct pass-through to all of these providers. So just real quickly, like if you go to Amazon Follies website, you'll see the SSML spec. They differ by provider a little bit. And you can put things like break tags and emphasizing words or dropping into different dialects or languages and a number of other things. And the same with Microsoft Cognitive Services. Here they have even more of their own MSTTS namespace that allows you to specify just how you want that audio to sound. And the more you can customize it for expression, intonation, phonetic substitution, etc., you're getting more human-like voices, which leads to the videos passing that Turing test, okay? And so anyways, here's a quick view of our XSD. This is just a sort of day in the life for us. Everything you can do in our system is an element. And here you can see a click tag. It takes a selector, some other optional params, I think. We have other kinds of tags here, like highlight this element, or put a box around it, or give me a top bar, or on-screen titling, et cetera. And then we have things like stop recording, start recording to deal with the flow of control around recording. And here's just a couple other sample elements. Here's your highlight. There it is, your selector param, et cetera. So these are all sort of the ways that we describe various behaviors. This one's really cool. It's a chapter marker. And it tells the output video to essentially stamp it with the chapter. And it makes a thumbnail in VLC or QuickTime Player, and it'll forward reference all the different parts of your video. And even with this, we might do some on-screen effects and explode it into something you see in the video as well. And so it's pretty useful, both for video metadata and on-screen display, et cetera. And then the last one here is like the slide tag. So like we can embed, here you see like access any process contents lack. So we put in well-formed XHTML here, and then we'll show whatever you put there on screen as a slide. So you could build your own whole presentation in our video rendering engine with text and HTML and step through a nice little video. So in a minute, we'll look at some GenAI prompts and so forth, but I actually want to relay my first sort of initial reactions to using ChatGPT a while ago. I think it's a couple years ago now. And I wanted to use this in my examples today, but they've actually archived the original models for ChatGPT because they're basically obsolete now. But my first impressions from the response was like, wow, because I gave it a prompt, a real simple one, and it came back with well-formed XML right away, the way I wanted it, and I was just blown away. And so I was like, this is amazing. And click, come on now. And so, but also, I had to pause for a minute because it felt like there's some kind of magic going on there, some kind of generalized compute. And I even thought it might spell the impending doom for XSLT, which is heresy, I know, but it was just a wow experience, okay? So, but all comic aside, from this came a lot of expectations, not only with myself, but my partner and my business and many others around what all of this could do for us. And actually, after the presentations this morning, it's amazing to see the applied use of this in Marta's talk there. That was awesome. But anyhow, like this is from Gartner. This is sort of the hype cycle, and it's cool to see the early adopters already using it. But according to this, we're still at the peak of inflated expectations, and really over the next 2 to 5 years, a lot more of this will be practically rolling out, and probably things we're all building here, actually, from what I know. So the magic was pretty strong at first, but also I have a lot of fails, and partly because we have a customized schema here, right? We showed it a little bit ago with that Spiel XSD. And so I learned this morning, watching the other talks, with standard schemas like Ditto or even HTML, that sort of guess the next token thing goes really well, and the confirmation to the schema goes a lot easier than when you bring your own. So, but we'll look at that in a moment. So before we go into the prompt XML journey a little deeper, let's just talk about the simplified stack for generative AI. So at the top or the bottom, whichever way you look at it, you have hardware vendors, NVIDIA, you have Microsoft and Amazon are, I believe, building their own customized chips to compete with NVIDIA, and so that's a really capital-intensive sort of thing. The second layer, we have foundational models, as discussed already this morning, OpenAI. I don't have a comprehensive list, but that too is very capital-intensive and takes a lot of training data, et cetera. And then sort of in the third layer, there's many in the tooling layer, I just put a few. Think of this as sort of your outer loop to things. I mean, you can have a session with an LLM, and that is in of itself its own loop, potentially. But there's other tooling that sort of collates or might call a lot of different systems and bring the response together into something more cohesive. And then lastly, the app layer, where it's going to essentially rely on all of these other layers. And so some of them are black box from some providers because they run up in the cloud and you don't kind of actually know what's running. But I guess that when we're calling these things, we're usually often in layer 2 or 3, basically. And we'll use that as a reference later. So let's explore some prompts and techniques for outputting to XML. Or how to do it wrong. There's a lot of good fails in here that I've sort of tripped across. So yeah, so like here's that example. If it's a common schema, it's going to know what comes next often. And so in this regard, actually, that's why you get a lot of really good, well-formed HTML out of the box, as Octavian actually showed a little bit ago. Bear with me. And so, it's easy to guess the next token, et cetera. So with our case, it's custom XML, so we have to put a lot more into the prompt to name the elements, the attributes, and the namespaces, and we'll look at that shortly. And then sort of the second category of building is like this. This is just some pseudocode or some JavaScript code, and this would be more like the tooling way of doing it. So imagine like an XML builder where the operations in the LLM or your prompt are actually shelling out or actually building the document on the sidelines, and they're using the semantics of what you're saying to actually make function calls versus entirely using transformers. So this is a wild and crazy idea, but I would say this would actually fix some of the issues that I found, at least with some of the things I was doing. For these examples we're going to do today, I'm going to use a tool called Ollama. I don't know if you've checked it out. It's super cool. It allows you to run models right there on your laptop, okay? And the more RAM, the better. And so it's a lot like Docker. So here I said like Ollama pool Mistral, and it looks just like Docker as it downloads. And I believe it even selects models based off of how much RAM you have available. And it will basically pull that down. And when we do these, when we do R&D and stuff in production, we'll use a lot bigger hardware with more RAM, and it ends up being like 80 gigs of a model instead of 4. But for the sake of these demos and this exploration that's going on, it's a really quick way to install it on your laptop, pull down a model, and then run it. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to run a bunch of attempts at prompts and so forth. Okay. And now for our get on with it moment. Okay, so let's actually do the thing. So all right, make a new XML document with Spiel as the root element, okay? So I asked I tried a bunch of different methods, and of course ChatGPT gets it, does a really good job. There's our well-formed XML doc. And so did all the prior GPTs as well, but they were obsoleted. This was Llama 2, so we said, Ollama run Llama 2, as you see at the top there, and I asked it just to give me a simple document, and it gave me the Python code. What is that, E-tree? Yeah. Cool, but no thanks. And actually, Llama 3 did a lot better. It actually gave us our blank doc, and we're going to build up on this, so we'll have a whole bunch of these. And then here we asked Mistral, and it made the doc, but then it totally hallucinated a whole bunch of elements. I have no idea why it would do that, but it just needs more direction, right? As Octavian said, you have to change your prompts based off of whichever LLM you're using, and this one just went crazy on us. So here, let's actually do something a little more interesting. Since we're going to be piping this through XSD validation towards the end, we're going to add our namespace because we're going to need that. And so we said, all right, add the namespace. Again, ChatGPT, flying colors. Llama 3, also good. And Mistral actually behaved now. So by adding the namespace, it decided now not to hallucinate. Now, I guess I could up arrow and run this 10 times, and the fact is you get a bunch of different results too. That's part of the challenges section of these presentations and part of truing up and getting a better source of truth here. So it did a better job, great, but I'm still not convinced. Let's keep going. Yeah, so let's do a more practical example, right? So we're gonna make an instructional video about how to set the vacation autoresponder in Gmail, and I'll read you the prompt here in a second. We're gonna give it some instructions that are very compatible with Vidiate's format. Okay, I'll read this for you real quick, really quick. You should not have to read this if you don't want. You are a helpful scriptwriter and summarize technical information into well-spoken verbal scripts for instructional videos. Use a professional and authoritative tone. Emphasize clickstream information if it exists. And if you don't put that, you get some more stuff. The topic is setting a vacation responder in Gmail. Limit the response to 500 words or less. You will only respond in XML, right? And the root element is spiel with an attribute titled XML namespace XSML having a value of the URI, and an attribute titled XML namespace with the value of Vidiate's spiel XST. So in that, we're adding the second namespace we need to be able to pipe this thing through XMLint shortly. For each sentence in the response, add a P element with a child element of that tag right there, which contains text content of the sentence. Okay, so this actually generated a lot of really decent results, and that's what I'm going to go through now. So, well, ChatGPT did a great job. This is, again, version 4, like all of these examples. But what was interesting is that it wanted to already respond with P tags, and we happen to use those too. So here we're doing like a redirection just with the prompt. We're saying for each P element, because that's their thing, add a child element of SSML speak, which contains the text content of the P element. So we're taking the text from one, cutting it, and pasting it into a new child element underneath, which is pretty fun here, you know. You can get into transformations by just defining the differential, if you will. Mistral, I don't know. It just made up all kinds of neat things. And so for me, you know, that's my WTF moment here. It's like, but I've also found when given really good guidance, it can make good XML just from the prompt layer. So, which one was this? Yeah, so actually, this is the first actual well-formed and useful version from Mistral, and all I added different was that yellow stuff. So it's like you do one little thing different, boom, it's finally working and well-formed, but you know, there's a lot of sort of randomness in these outputs, and again, part of the challenges. So now we're going to take all these things and pipe them through validation. So in simplified terms, we're going to take the output of that and pipe it through our XSD and see what we get. So that's why I'm going to sit down and actually use the terminal here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is, oh, hold on, we need to do this. Yeah, come on now. No. Okay, hold on. Yeah, okay. A lot of tension there. Okay, so, okay, hold on a sec. We're going to zoom that out a little bit. So we have just like a simplified bash script, and the reason we're using this is like to be a little bit tool agnostic. It doesn't matter what language you're running this stuff in. It's just XML and XSD. So, I guess I don't need my glasses. So first of all, we have the prompt, okay? And I don't need to read you that all again. But then down below, we actually run this prompt from the command line with just ollama run the model name, and then we provide it the prompt, and then we output to a file, and with the T, we'll be able to see it sort of streaming or whatever. And then the next step is to take that, validate it, and actually we redirect, you can't see here, it's at the end, it wrapped, but we redirect standard error to standard out so that we can just quickly see the errors, if any. And if the exit signal was not 0 on XMLint, we'll put out a fails message and we'll cat the validation, which has all of the problems with our XML. And then, of course, if it validates, we just get the cool guy symbol. All right, so with that, let's run a few interactively, and then I have a bunch of already saved ones, sort of like pre-baked cookies here, like they're already done, because they do take a little bit of time each time. So I should already be running one here. So we'll run that bash script. There it goes. Cool. So the anticipation is killing me. OK, so basically what this is doing is outputting, but you could already see that it's putting clicks outside of the SSML block, and that's not part of our schema, right? So great, very good. So I've done a bunch of others of these, so let's just look through them. So that's way too zoomed in. So here's like an example of one that validates, right? And as we saw in some of the other demos, if you up arrow or if you run these things again and again and again and again, you'll get totally different results. So the next one that also validates, I can't do a side-by-side too quickly here, but if you put them side by side, they'd be saying different things in probably a slightly different voice, and you'd get different effects. And so you either need to coach it on the voice you want, and or like with Marta's example, you need subject matter experts to review it, or some other systems to adversarially check it or whatever. So these are like the happy path here. That's nice. And in fact, I found that the less complexity in the prompt, the higher degree of validation you end up getting. But like if you start layering on namespaces or some other stuff, you get all kinds of crazy hallucinations. And I'm going to go over those really quickly, rapid fire order. So just to give you some more looks at how fails are coming out, again, clicks in the wrong place here. Okay, that's one style. Another one is, well, sometimes it's like, here's the XML output, and I couldn't find a prompt to tell it not to do that. But again, it's just about knowing the right incantations, and then all of a sudden that thing may get stripped forever. So you really do, this is a sort of glib example, but you want to write your own post-processing, I suppose, before you just parse from standard out, because until you figure out how to only get XML, you're going to get random stuff, only sometimes. Other stuff, yeah, that one's another click in the wrong place, but it does some wacky stuff with quotes occasionally. And this is kind of like if you've ever, well, I'm sure you've worked with XML if you're here, but all the single quote, double quote, and then entities and so forth, it gets that wrong, actually. And so with that, let me actually go back to my deck, because it has all the slides of the general fails that I found through this process, and I'll share those. So like, one of them is non-well-formed XML. So, and these were on older models. What's been interesting in this journey is that over the last maybe 18 or 24 months, the models have gotten better and better and better, and they've stopped doing bad behaviors, okay? But you'll still get that from some of them. Probably not if they're using a builder method, though, behind the scenes using a real DOM, because you couldn't do that if you were. But hallucinated namespaces, I've had crazy stuff show up, and that can break validation in some cases, depending on how it hallucinated it. Bogus entities. I mean, surely we could be more resilient and import namespaces and so forth, or DTDs or whatever that is needed to correct for that, but sometimes you'll get even more wacky entities that are on the fringe. Unintended preamble or like head content, yeah, that can be just solved with processing it a little more defensively. And then stuff like, this is the quote thing I'm talking about. I'll leave that up for a second. It's hard to make sense of all of that, especially at the end here. But so I'm sure with sort of honing the prompt, you might be able to get better and better at this, but sometimes when I tell it, don't do that bad thing you're doing, doesn't necessarily do any better, actually. So a couple other ones here. And arbitrary element hierarchies. And in fact, I think, in this one, this is an example of that came up while I was running samples for this talk. So like maybe literally 1 in 50 to 1 in 100 attempts, it just does that. So here it forgot to put a terminating p tag, and it pushed a new child, and now you got 2 nested p's. Okay. So in closing, it seems like in general, when you're using like ChatGPT, the engines that are a little bit more opaque, they do a better job and utilize XML Builder. I've actually was impressed this morning with seeing how other models are using data with better, and HTML with better efficacy. But at least with custom schemas, I'm still on this journey to find out better and better ways to do this. And I hope to learn from all of you today and this weekend. But yeah, people don't want to send their proprietary data into the cloud, so like you're going to basically be running your own models or signing an agreement with the provider that's going to let you have that data security. Yeah, so look, as these tools evolve, I hope to get the net effect of as if they were building a little DOM object along on the side. But it's looking like these transformers are just way better trained on already known schemas. So I believe in my journey, I'm looking for something that's going to actually be able to let me say, all right, use this XSD, now go build me something. And at every step when it's assessing, adding things, and it might have a sort of tendency to want to hallucinate something or add garbage to the equation, I'd like it to self-check itself even before outputting. When we were doing a lot of R&D with this in the last 6 or so months, what we ended up just doing was running it again and again and again and again. And if it was exiting not a signal exit code of 0, we just do it again and do it again. And so it's like we end up finding ourselves just sort of brute forcing it. But I believe there's probably more efficient ways further up the chain to do this. So after all of that, with all those fails and so forth, I'd like to conclude with, I would like to rename this presentation An Idiot's Guide to Failing at Generating XML from LLMs. So based off of all those random things. So with that, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dave. And we have time for questions. So anyone? Yeah, from Marta.
About how different LLMs behave with XML stuff. My first experience with XSLT and ChatGPT, even GPT-4, was that when I put some really complex template and asked for improving it, like it's doing this and I wanted to do that, ChatGPT would tell me, you probably need to check that and you might consider this, but wouldn't give me the code no matter how I tried. It would just give me plenty of advice, but never code.
Yeah.
So Llama, yes, and Claude, yes. Claude doesn't care of getting dirty and just doing some templating. Sometimes wrong, but at least it tries.
Wow.
What's your experience with ChatGPT? Did it ever do these things to you, to just give you advice instead of giving you code?
No, but actually ChatGPT from the beginning, like my first prompt ever was, all right, take the first 10 sentences of the US Constitution. It's a very well-known document, I guess, and chunk it out like this, right? And it put it into our parlance, and I picked that up, dropped it into our engine, and I made like a, 2-minute video out of that. And that was just first shot ever. And so that's what led to sort of that hype curve enthusiasm. But along the way, we would use it also to generate reference or test material, et cetera. And it had always been good about it. But when you want to get into complex things is where it gets tough, especially putting elements in mixed content. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And one last question before coffee break from Stephen.
So let me ask the same question I asked last time. Does it save you any time?
Well, actually, me, no, because I write that XML from memory. Me personally, no, but that's an open question because our customers are subject matter experts already, and they're tech writers. Yeah, so then it comes down to just the bootstrapping, sort of like an outline or a reference version that then gets a little bit more continued. So it does help break that writer's block barrier. But I'd say the jury's out on that. We don't have enough data from our own customers to say, yeah, we'd rather generate this from whole cloth rather than to write it ourselves.
Okay, so thank you very much again. And there is coffee break ready outside.